Hi, I'm Rose. Here with me today is Marianne Williamson, American spiritual teacher, leader, lecturer, and author. 4 of her books have made the New York Times bestsellers list, and today she's here to talk with us about suffering and enlightenment. Marianne, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you.
I appreciate your having me. Thank you.
So one of the questions I have is, before returning to Houston to run a metaphysical store, you were a theater and philosophy major in school. What prompted your interest in spirituality?
My mother tells stories about what a big production my prayers were every night when I was a little kid.
Really?
Yeah, I think all children have a natural understanding of the inner life more than we think. And the problem is that the society, the culture, sort of unlearn, we learn all this other stuff on top of that we then have to unlearn in order to get back to the fundamental knowing in our hearts. So when you look at the rituals that are involved in all the great religious systems, there's a drama there, a profundity there, that predated theater as we know it. Now, the greatest drama, though, is not anything in the outer world. The greater drama is what happens in our own transformation, i.e. we rewire me. That is exactly what God does. It rewires the brain. There have been all kinds of studies done about how when people meditate, there's a change in neurotransmitters and neurocircuitry. And that rewiring is the process of enlightenment. Really the relinquishment of an entire thought system and an entire pattern and trajectory of brain synapses, which lead us to a certain kind of thinking and behavior. And the acceptance instead of a completely different mindset. And to make the entire jump, whether you're talking about any of the great religious systems or Alcoholics Anonymous or anything that is a serious spiritual path, the idea here is that there is an otherworldly support here, that we cannot make the jump entirely by ourselves. In other words, really the point here is that from a spiritual perspective, you cannot rewire yourself. That there is a higher power that can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And that is very different. That is what makes the real spiritual outlook different from a traditional psychotherapeutic one today, which is that you ask a power greater than you to do for you what you cannot do for yourself, that I myself cannot rewire me, because that puts me against me. But if I ask a power, one spiritual way of putting it is the idea of a quote-unquote divine intercession, where the Course in Miracles talks about from a power beyond our thought system that enters into our own. That's when you're talking about the genuine spiritual impulse, you're talking about rewiring from a higher force.
Right. Wow, that's fascinating. So how did you shift your focus from theater to metaphysics?
I didn't shift. I was in my 20s. I don't, that's asking anybody. We could ask anybody on the street, do you live your major? Are you doing what? It's like, I didn't shift my focus. I just, actually I didn't. I mean, if you think about the fact that I was a theater and philosophy major, and you look at what I do now, I'm probably one of the few people who do live my major.
Yeah, it definitely.
And I left school in my junior year, so there was no strategy there, I assure you.
Well, it all plays into who you've become. So
that's
like you said, it translates.
How do any of us get to where we got? If you just look at the external markers, you don't necessarily understand very deeply the transformational process that took any individual from A to B.
I love your first book, A Return to Love. There's a passage from the book that has become an inspirational quote. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear that we are powerful beyond measure. How can we overcome the fear that we have within ourselves and become this powerful beyond measure?
From the perspective of books like A Course in Miracles, fear is to love what darkness is to light. It's not actually a thing. It's the absence of a thing. You can't get rid of darkness by hitting it with a baseball bat. You have to turn on the light, and the darkness is gone. You also can't, quote unquote, get rid of your fears by analyzing them away or pushing them away or forging through them. what you do is replace them. Fear is mental energy that is your internal power appropriated by neurotic forces. And those neurotic forces, Freud defined neurosis as separation from self. What you do is remember who you are and why you're here. When you remember, I am a child of God, I am an extension of a divine force bigger than myself, then you are reminded who you are. I am on this earth with a divine mission of giving love. As long as I remember that, I am here to represent the God who sent me, God by whatever name, and in any situation, merely there to show up, to rise to the occasion, and to give love. If I am in any other mindset, there will be fear. So this idea that you can go out there and do it, you know, we have a mindset that dominates our society today, even one in the supposedly transformational higher consciousness community that actually inadvertently breeds fear. Because it says you can go out there and do it. But actually, the whole point of that paragraph, it's our power that frightens us. It's our power that frightens us because it is a power that is beyond us. And that's what we don't want to claim, because that means that I of myself, what am I of myself? But when you realize you are not of yourself, you are part of this bigger whole, then fear just doesn't, you know, your house is so filled with light, there can't be any darkness.
You know, many of us try to avoid the emotional pain also, right? To your point earlier, rather than facing it. But, you know, in your latest book, Tears to Triumph, you explain how to move through the hurt. Can you give our audience a few tips?
Well, I think the first thing you do is you give yourself emotional permission. Heartbreak didn't just start. It's not like a modern phenomenon. People were suffering thousands of years ago. The great religious teachings are about that. Buddha's main point was that life is suffering. God sends Moses to deliver the Israelites from suffering as slaves in Egypt. Jesus suffered on the cross. But then Buddha transitioned from the recognition of suffering to enlightenment. The Israelites transitioned from slavery to the promised land. Jesus transitioned from crucifixion to resurrection. And we, through moving through these dark nights of our soul and learning all the things to be learned there, transition to inner peace and happiness. You know, years ago, we were very old-fashioned in our thinking about medicine. We didn't realize that we had to proactively cultivate health through nutrition, through exercise, and so forth. And we just waited till we got sick, and then we treated it very allopathically, hoping that, you know, medicine could give us a pill that would magically eradicate or suppress the symptoms.
And we're going to promise to change, right?
Well,
we always make that promise to change when we get sick.
And we came to understand that health is not the absence of sickness. Sickness is the absence of health. We need now to make that same paradigm shift into an integrative model of psychic healing. The psyche has an immune system, just like the body does. But what's happening now is people are feeling depressed and told, this is a disease, and we will give you a pill for it. When the truth of the matter is, happiness is not the absence of depression. Depression is the absence of happiness. We must cultivate happiness the way we must proactively cultivate health. And you do that through meditation, through serious spiritual practice, through forgiveness, through atonement. And right now is not the time in human history to be numb. This is not the time in human history to buy into this notion that if you're upset, it's because you have a disorder. You know, people say, I have an anxiety disorder, or I have a depressive disorder. What's happening here, it's like the canaries in the coal mine are dying, and the owner of the mine is saying that there's something wrong with the canaries. Right. Now, I do want to, because I do talk about the over-medication of Americans, and I talk in the book about the fact that the FDA has warned that for people 25 years old and younger, antidepressants actually increase, not decrease, the risk of suicidal ideation. This is an extremely important topic that we all need to be talking about, particularly because of how many antidepressants are being given to children. Having said that, I do want to make it very clear, no one should just, who is on antidepressants, who becomes part of this conversation, should just go throw them down the toilet. You need to be very careful if you're getting off antidepressants do so only under medical supervision. So we must be much, much more sober and reflective about getting on them, but also very, very careful about how you get off them as well.
And I just want to point out...
And they're addictive, by the way.
Oh, yes, that I'm sure we know, most of us know. I just want to point out that you explain the process of breaking this down very, very clearly in the book.
Oh, thank
so
you.
it's really, I think that our audience will find it very helpful on
I hope
how
so.
to break down this whole process. A lot of your work is based on A Course in Miracles, where your inner voice is guiding you. How can we learn to trust that inner voice that we are not familiar with?
Well, people talk about the committee in my head all the time. We have negative voices speaking all the time.
Well, we listen to
so
those.
it's not like we don't think we have voices in our head. We do. It's just usually they're negative because the mindset that dominates the planet is based on fear rather than love. In both Judaism and Christianity, there is a term, and that term is the small, still voice for God. So what happens is if you wake up in the morning, you go right to the computer, right to the newspaper, right to your phone, and you just download, when your mind is most open to new impressions, the fear and the stress of the world. It's like you're allowing fear to just steal your mind. And of course you're going to hear the thoughts that reflect that mindset all day. And of course you're going to be depressed at a certain point. And of course you're going to be anxious at a certain point. The point of praying in the morning, the point of meditating in the morning, is so that you can dissolve, just like you take a shower so that you don't take yesterday's dirt into the day on your body, you meditate so you don't take yesterday's stress with you on your mind. The voice for fear and the voice for love are both your voice. But one is your voice when you're cynical, angry, anxious, and crazy, and one is your voice when you're peaceful and calm and certain. One word you can use for it is intuition. How many times have you made a mistake in your life and then thought to yourself, darn, I knew not to do that. But you weren't clear what you were supposed to listen to. And that's what meditation gives us.
Now, you also talk about the power of intention.
Well, Buddha, this whole power of intention thing, this idea of having an intention, Hitler had an intention. So the idea of just you have an intention and make it happen and you manifest, once again, Hitler is a manifester. So Buddha talked about wrong intention and right intention. Intention of itself is neutral. The issue is right intention. If your intention is only, to make happen what you want to make happen, a cancer cell goes off to make happen what it makes happen. But right intention is that the cell wants to collaborate with other cells to support the healthy functioning of the whole. People are talking about this like it's something new. Nothing new. The spiritual point, however, the spiritual mountaintop is not that you had a vision and you made it happen. The spiritual mountaintop is that you had a vision for something that would create something good, true, holy, and beautiful for the world, and you made it happen. Right. Big difference.
Big difference.
It's a difference between magic and miracles. Magic is where you use universal forces to give you what you want. Miracles is where you ask how you might be of service to the universe.
It's going from selfish to selfless.
Hello. And words like power of intention, all that can be used just to bolster the selfishness. Of course, these days it's just called self-care.
That's right.
I've been around so long, I know all the trends, I've lived through them all.
And do you see history repeating itself? Just in different language, not like different language, in different terms.
Well, and
it's the same message, right? But different.
Well, yes, and
terms.
the ego is so sly because, of course, the notion of self-care is very legitimate and valid. But you see how the ego uses it for its purposes, which these days is really to justify what you and I grew up thinking was, that's called selfishness. But now it's all these new highfalutin words, like if somebody says narcissist, rather than just, boy, he was selfish today. Everybody's labeled, and really it's dangerous because we all think that we have the right to label this person this or that, and then, of course, that extends into everybody's situational despair, right, being labeled as depression. And
now we're just associating. We can't actually associate without a label, which is really
hurting
our society.
So you and I grew up at a time when the letters you wanted after your names were your BA, MA, PhD. Right. Today the letters all have to do with I have this pathology and I have that pathology and I have this disorder, which is actually not funny because it just will twist a person's self-perception. A lot of this is particularly of concern to me for young people because the 20s are hard.
They are.
And
the teens
they're
are
hard for
You know, it's
everybody.
just-
So the idea that all these young people are being put on meds and told you have a depressive disorder or mood disorder or whatever by doctors who have not talked to them long enough to make any kind of serious diagnosis. You know, some people think that this conversation stigmatizes mental illness. And of course it's important not to minimize or stigmatize mental illness. But it's also such as schizophrenia or bipolar, etc. But it's also important not to pathologize normal human suffering. And there is a spectrum of normal human suffering. You went through a heartbreak. You know, once again, going back in the 20s, I mean, who didn't go through all that?
We survived.
You have a bitter divorce. You have a heartbreak. You have a professional failure. You have financial ruin. Someone you love died. These things happen in life. It's not a reason to rush for a pharmaceutical solution. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It means you're going through a dark night of the soul. And what I have learned in my life, and having worked as much as I have, which is a lot, with people in, you know, I always say people don't come to me because things are going well. I've worked with a lot of people in what would be considered catastrophic situations. And if you actually look at your own experience and you talk to other people who have been through things, this is sometimes where we learn the deepest lessons about life, about ourselves, about other people. I know it was through my own dark nights of the soul that I learned not to treat life as a joke, because it's not one. I learned that other people's feelings matter as more than as mine. I learned that love is the most important thing, and don't treat it lightly. I learned not to take people and situations for granted. I learned about how there are consequences when I myself mess up. I learned to appreciate love, because when you have enough family members or friends who have died, you start really appreciating what remains. These are the things that I learned during the very dark nights of my life. Sometimes you learn about yourself and God and other people more deeply during those very, very sad times. And I'm not the only one who says that.
Right. There are lessons. They are absolutely.
There are lessons to be learned during those painful times. And so when you said, how do you begin by giving yourself permission to grieve. I remember a time when if someone's husband died or child or anything, it was understood. There would be a year of grief. People wore black. That was before we all wore black all the time. And you know, now it's rush, rush, rush. We've taken the dictates of a business model. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. What could be more functional than dealing with your heartbreak? And if you have 45 tears to cry, crying 17 is not enough.
No. You're a busy woman.
I am.
You are a very busy woman. Besides writing amazing books, what else are you doing in the city? You're lecturing. You moved back to New York now.
I moved to New York. Los Angeles feels like my sort of soul's base, and I'm a Texan. That's where I come from. But you know, we have a lot of great places, and I felt like I should move to New York, and I'm having a fun time here. And I lecture every Wednesday night at the Middle Collegiate Church on 2nd Avenue between 6th and 7th.
Perfect.
And people, it's also free live streamed anywhere. The link stays up for 72 hours. So anybody who is interested in this conversation, of course, the book Tears to Triumph is coming out. And I hope it does contribute to a deeper inquiry than we've been having about the meaning of our despair and the transformation of our despair.
Yes, and it does.
Thank you.
It does. Marianne, you're a busy woman. What else are you doing here? You just moved back to New York. We can find you on your website.
Yes, anybody can find out anything I'm doing in my work on marianne.com, Marianne. And I do lecture every Wednesday night live in New York City at the Middle Collegiate Church. That's at 2nd Avenue between 6th and 7th. But that's also live streamed anywhere. The link is free and available for 72 hours. Okay. And anybody can find me on my public page and Facebook and Twitter and all of that. And I'm always doing something. Mainly right now, really interested in this inquiry represented by this book, Tears to Triumph, available on Amazon.com and all the places like that. And, you know, the Course in Miracles says an idea grows stronger when it is shared. We are all rather horrifyingly aware of what has happened in the world because those who hate got together. And when a lot of people form a field, a resonant field around hate, what a profoundly destructive force this can be on the planet. And now it's time for us to own and to create the only real antidote, and that's that enough of us have a resonant field and a conversation about love and what love can create. And that's what I feel is happening. That's what I feel like things like Rewire Me are. Books like mine, there's so many books and tapes and websites, and we're all doing it. We just need to step it up.
That's right, and we're all doing it together.
That's right.
Marianne Williamson, Tears to Triumph, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.